Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Hello and welcome to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneur Center right here in Arizona, Tempe, Arizona. I just covered the whole state there. I've never done that before, where we help build businesses and connect you with the right people. And I am here today with my friend David Cook, CEO of the Cook Group LLC, and we are looking forward to a conversation and introducing David's work to you, our listeners. And it's all about listening today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. It's so good to be on the show.
Likewise, we were just sharing with Daryl that I got to be on your podcast, we think February, March, just a handful of months ago, and loved that experience. And you're 20 episodes in. I
am 20 episodes in. Pales in comparison to your greatness, but this is you got to start somewhere.
I don't know about that. We are going to have to look to see. I think Daryl rounded up to maybe 200 or so that I've already hosted in 6 years. You've been at this since January,
right?
So. Hey, talk to me in 6 years.
You got to start somewhere.
That's right. Talk, if you would please, about the podcast. Can we start there, since that's our most recent opportunity to connect? And then I want to get back into just everything that you've done professionally. But that podcast is a special project for you, and it's really something that I know you are very passionate about when it comes to being in relationship with people and helping them with some specific challenges.
Well, great. Thank you. It is definitely a passion project. The show is called Stop Telling and Start Listening. And what we really focus on is taking a look at how we can shift our listening behaviors. And the reason we need to shift our listening behaviors more than anything else, especially nowadays, is there's a lot of people standing on corners yelling and screaming at each other. There are a lot of people, we talk about mental health issues and those kind of things. There are a lot of people who are feeling disconnected, unheard, disrespected, lost, whatever. And really, my belief is that we can solve a lot of those problems, kind of comically, we can solve the world's problems if we learn to listen better. But it really is true, is that I think that we have a great opportunity to bring people closer together if we learn to meet people where they are for who they are and listen to them share their stories, their journey, their beliefs, why they believe what they believe, how it influences their life's decisions. And once we have that context, we have a better opportunity to communicate with them on the level that, meet them where they are, on the level that they're at, as opposed to trying to make people meet me on my terms, meet other people on their terms.
So great. And has everything to do with your company and the work that you do for organizations and businesses. So tell us about the Cook Group and what you're doing.
Well, it's funny. The Cook Group has evolved as, typical entrepreneur, right? But the Cook Group evolved as a sales coaching business 20 years ago.
Originally.
Yeah. And my story is and hate's a hard word, but people always saw me as a sales guy. And I took that as not a compliment. I took that as an insult, because I think salespeople are kind of schmarmy. And I'm a relationship expert. I like to believe that my success in sales and my successes in business development and coaching was creating an opportunity for people to share for me what they were looking for. And me, whether it was in a role as a salesperson or as a manager in a company, helping them find what they're looking for, understand what it is that they need, why they need it, why it's important to them, what's getting in the way of their success. And if I can help them overcome those obstacles, then I have a better relationship with them. They learn to trust me. We then can accomplish more things together. And that's really how I started. My business was originally, it was sales coaching, because a lot of companies would hire salespeople, and they would hire salespeople that behaved like bad salespeople, but because they had that stereotype in their mind, a personable, talkative, kind of arrogant kind of guy. So I need to have him. And they hire that individual. And then that individual would be exactly what they hired. And they said, but they're not doing anything. Of course they're not doing anything, because you didn't hire a salesperson. You hired a salesperson that you hated, not a salesperson that is truly good at what they do. And that's why I started teaching people that if you learn to listen, learn to build relationships built on trust and integrity, then what you can do is you can accomplish great things.
That's the whole reason I even opened Phoenix Business Radio.
Really?
Giving people an opportunity to share their story and really listen to what it is that they have going on in their lives and how they're serving the world. Yes, that's the impetus for this whole gig.
There you go.
Yeah. So you spend a lot of time between Arizona and Detroit. and you have clients all over.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you work with large organizations
Well,
to,
yeah, I would say the organizations that I work with now are much bigger than they used to be. When I first started out as an entrepreneur, any client is a good client, and then you find out that not all business is good business. And I became a little bit more particular, but most of my clients right now run in the neighborhood of 75 employees or more. And I spent a lot of time in Detroit because I do have one client in Detroit that I find that I am much more effective when I'm in the office walking around and seeing people. The challenge is now I'm in Detroit 2 weeks at a trip because they're only in the office 2 days a week. So for me to get a week's worth of work in, traditional week's worth of work, I need to be there for 2 weeks to get 4 days of office time. So that's how that works.
yeah,
But I'm from Detroit, so going there every 6 weeks isn't a bad thing.
right. Tell us a little bit about the listening platform. I'm looking for the name. You've got this.
Selfless listening.
Yeah. Tell us about that. You developed that? That's
Yes.
a program.
Selfless. Actually, I'll tell you a little story about selfless listening
Yeah.
really quick because it's kind of funny. I would say it was maybe 15 years ago, that far back. I was in an event where there were three sales coaches were giving a presentation. I was one of three. I looked at the two other guys. One of them I knew really well, and I always viewed him as a competitor. And I probably had a less than healthy attitude towards him. And it turned out he's become a great friend, and he surprised me with a lot of really cool things that he's done in my life. And I respect him for who he is and what he does. But at the time I looked down upon him that he wasn't as good as me. So I'm in this room with these two guys. I'm going, gosh, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. The true story. And it's my turn to get up, and I grab this marker and I go up grab the whiteboard, and I say, the problem with sales is that everybody says salespeople's greatest weakness is they don't listen. It's not that we don't listen, it's that we haven't been taught how to listen well. And I grabbed this marker and I said, what we need to do is we need to learn to be selfless in our listening. And selfless being is that the person that I'm speaking to is the most important person in the room. So selfless means that I have to clean out my filters, my beliefs, my values, my judgment, all that stuff, and really create a safe space for the person to communicate with me who they are, what they are, where they're going, kind of what I said earlier. And listening is different than telling, right? So we're going to listen. We're not going to tell. The opposite of selfless listening is selfish telling. And I said, so what it is it's a platform where the more you engage somebody in a conversation where they're sharing, where you're learning, there's about 4 layers of information. It's listening to learn, learning to understand, understanding to know, knowing to solve. And I winged this. And at the end of that 5-minute presentation, this salesperson that I have become friends with now said, "That's brilliant." And I looked at it and I go, actually it is.
And it's now a program.
It is now a program, and I've developed it since. And really, when you think about listening to learn, it's high level. So listening to learn is and I use the word it's awareness. You become aware of there's something to talk about. And so somebody says something, and that we're out in listening mode, and they say something, that's interesting, tell me more. And then the next stage is listening to learn, and listening to learn provides context as they're telling you more. Now I'm getting a better sense of what they were saying, what they meant by it, whatever it is. And I can explore, and I can get some depth and perspective and all that stuff. So I call that the context phase. Usually the problem is that if I know what an opportunity is and I have some context, most salespeople say, well, let me tell you about my solution. The truth of the matter is that they really don't have enough knowledge to really solve the problem, but they have enough information to think they understand the problem. That's why it's listening to learn, learning to understand. The next level of the conversation is understanding to know. You know exactly how they feel about the situation. You know exactly what's getting in the way. You know where they're struggling. And now what you start to see is why they talked about something as a challenge, issue, problem, or opportunity, because now you've gone deeper, and they're sharing information with you that they don't normally have time to share with people, or they don't have trust to share it with people. So I say, when you get to that point where somebody's talking about stuff that they normally don't talk about people, they're now starting to trust you at a level where now you know what's going on. You don't assume, you can't jump, you can't draw conclusions because they've told you their truth. And then once you have the knowledge, Now you know to solve. So when they say to you in that situation, say, hey, Dave, what do you think? They're asking me to be part of their solution. And now I can give them an answer and I can feed it back and tie it to their story. Because otherwise, if I'm selfish telling, I'm going to fit it into my brochure or my context of, if it's relational, I say, yeah, when I was in the situation, this is what I did. But if I'm making it about me, I'm not making it about them. I'm being selfish. So the idea being is that I get it to a point where I can say, here's the story I heard. Here's the situation as you presented to me. Here's what I think your opportunities are. And then we can go from there.
I'm now scraping through our sales process, right? We call it a show concept meeting. I'm like, wow. I thought I was a good listener until just now. That's fantastic.
Well, you are a good listener. I've had just enough conversations with you that I know you are. But I think when I was first introducing this to somebody, and they said, "What's the opposite of selfless listening?" And I couldn't answer the question. They said, "Well, let's just think about it. Selfless. So if the opposite of selfless is selfish."
Mm-hmm.
So selfish means I've spun it around. It's now about me. What can I get out of you? What can I get from you? What can I, how can I accomplish what I came here to accomplish? And then telling is, let me give you the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when we're in coaching and we're solving problems, it's like, yeah, I have a few ideas, but what do you think you need to do? And why do you think that's important? You basically revisit the learning conversation because we intuitively know, well, I shouldn't say no is the right word, but we intuitively have a sense of what to do next. What we don't intuitively have is enough confidence to believe in it, or we have some fear, doubt, and concern that that's the right one. So to have a conversation with somebody where you're learning and you're feeding things back, they start to say, yeah, and the more we're talking, the more I realize this is where I need to go. And it was something they already believed. I just helped them stay on the path of their and trust their truth.
I think what happens for me, and I work on being a good listener. It's part of why I open the studio and do the work that I do outside of here. When it comes to the sales conversation, I do take off the hat of, I listen, but then I take it off at some point and I go for the get. and what you're helping me understand is that if I know that I have something great to offer, I can still stay in that place of listening and offer it with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And have them be more engaged in that as a conversation instead of, all right, well, here's what I've heard you say. Come with my agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm hearing myself throw some of the things out that they said because it doesn't fit the brochure, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And then laying it on them like, okay, well, here's what we have to offer. That's really a fantastic shift for me.
The challenge is, like you talk about the get, is I completely understand. We talk about this a lot. When we're coaching, is every meeting has to have an intention. You have to have an objective. So
Mm-hmm.
if we're in a sales call, the objective is to understand, find out what's going on in somebody's business and understand how you can help them.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's where I shift, though. How I can help them. This is and I started out as a sales guy in New York City, had zero knowledge of the industry I was selling in. But I would meet with people and I'd sit down with them and they go, oh, that's right. I'm supposed, we're here. I scheduled a 1:00 meeting with you. Okay, fine. So, well, if you don't want to meet, we don't have to. Well, no, but I got other things going. Okay, what are they? And I would completely pivot away from my agenda because they weren't going to listen anyway. But by having the conversation that we have and they talk about their business, I'm learning about their business because they're telling me about the struggles and the challenges. So they're inadvertently, unintentionally, showing where their bodies are buried,
Mm-hmm.
which they wouldn't normally volunteer out of the gate, especially if I'm trying to advocate for an outcome. So I'm learning about the business. I'm learning about their challenges and the work that they're in and how they work and how they think and how they speak. And as we go through that process, if I can find a way for them to think through the thing that's actually preventing us from having a conversation about my objective, they found value in the meeting. If they found value in the meeting, the translation is Dave brings value to my conversations. And if they find that Dave brings value, eventually say, oh, by the way, what do you do? And so, and they say, oh, interesting. And now they're seeing how they might be able to talk to me about what I do. But what I do is solve problems, but sometimes it's product based. Sometimes it was, service based. It doesn't really matter. But that was the leap, is that they trust me, which is the struggle salespeople have, because we don't trust salespeople. The reason we don't trust them is because they're out for themselves. They want to get the outcome. How do I get paid?
Mm-hmm.
How do I close a deal? Don't try to close a deal, and you'll probably close more,
Mm-hmm.
which drives sales trainers crazy when I say that, because, no, you have to. Not for me. It's about the relationship. I want people to, when they see sitting with Dave Cook, that meeting had value. I can't determine what that value is, but when they walk away, I'm so glad I met Dave Cook. And Dave Cook always walks away. You and I had, breakfast a couple months ago. It was the first time we had a face-to-face. I got something out of it. It was the connection of the conversation. We didn't have an agenda except to get to know each other and see what's going on. Mm-hmm. To me, that's what life is all about. I don't need to bring my satchel. I don't need to bring my tools and my toys. What I need to do is I need to bring me and be the best resource I can for them. In the end, I will have a relationship with them, which is what I want. Is it going to be a business relationship, a personal relationship, a professional resource relationship? I don't know. But by taking the pressure off of having to try to figure out a way to close a deal with you, now I'm free to investigate the entire space of what's in it for us.
Mm-hmm. Was there a time that you don't think you were a good listener?
Yeah, right now.
Is that a fair question?
Right now.
Well, that's because I'm interviewing you.
I know, but I have this personal struggle all the time.
Do you want to ask questions coming this way?
Yeah. Well, it's natural. I met with this one cohort of mine in Detroit, and she wanted me to meet her business partner, I think also boyfriend, but she's never revealed that they're in a relationship, but I'm pretty sure they are. So we're having this conversation and we're talking and talking and talking. And I get in the car and I drive away and I'm going, I think that I just owned that whole conversation. I feel like I talked 90 out of the 120 minutes. And I said to her, the next day when we talked, she said, oh yeah, he loved you. He thought you were so cool and blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, I'm sorry I talked so much. You kidding? I thought it was the greatest conversation. So it's just a matter of paying close attention. They wanted to hear from me and they were interviewing me and they were feeding on it. And in the end, it worked out, but there was a time where I'm going, I'm babbling Dave, and so I do worry about it. But I think that's it. Is that am I listening?
Yeah.
I don't know how you measure it, but
and an interview is clearly different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depending on the interview, but most interviews, we've invited you here to share your story and learn from you. That's different than many other settings. I'm thinking of a networking event I went to recently, and I think what you and I've talked about, I'm not comfortable networking, which is why I open Business RadioX, so people come here and then I can just be in listening.
Mm-hmm.
But in networking, when it's, maybe 2 minutes or people competing for attention and the airtime and here's my card and here's what I do, the pounce kind of thing, I always kind of walk away from those, like having to shed a little bit of my skin because I don't think they're designed to give people an opportunity to really deeply listen, unless whoever's facilitating it or hosting it kind of sets the tone a little bit differently.
Right. Well, the challenge with networking events is, if we using the law of economics as an example, but the law of economics is that market's always clear. There's an equal number of buyers and equal number of sellers. In a networking event, there are no buyers, but we all believe that there's a buyer there.
Interesting.
Nobody's there buying. Everybody's there selling.
Mm-hmm.
So then how do we create a shift there? So for me, I haven't gone to a networking event in years, but when I first moved to Phoenix, I went to every networking event I could go to several times over until I finally found the ones I liked and the ones I didn't like. But I used to play the game of, sometimes I wouldn't even tell people what I do. So, yeah, what do you do? And the guy would, individual would go on and on and on about their business. And oh my gosh, and he'd give me this business card and I'd put it in my left pocket. And then somebody else would have this great conversation to put in my right pocket. And they said, what do you do with the people in the left pocket? I said, I spam the spoop out of them because that's all they want anyway. And the people in the right-hand pocket were people that I wanted to follow up with and actually talk to them longer because they were interesting. And there was an exchange of information, not one way, but actually a flow back and forth. And so, I treated networking events just like sales calls. Is tell me what you want me to know.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you do? Not as important as, why are you here? What's important? Who you're looking for? what's a win for you in this event and all those kind of things. Because for me, that was what I was looking for, was information. And I got a couple times, I will just tell you a funny story, but I had a couple situations where my friends that I were more familiar with would start to join a conversation I have with somebody. And then finally the person would look, so would somebody tell me what he does?
Oh, that's great.
And I said, well, actually, I do exactly what you've been experiencing. I'm listening to you tell me about your business. And then all my friends would go, yep, that's what Dave does. He's driving you crazy, isn't he? Yeah, man, he won't tell me what he's doing. I'm not going to. It's not what I'm here for. I'm here to meet people and see what they're all about.
Yeah. Wow. There has to be a great level of confidence that comes with that. And I've spent enough time with you to know that is evident in there. And it's also balanced with great humility too, which is really neat, because you hum right here.
I'm glad you see that. But
I'm pretty confident other people do, but here's Dave. The rest of us are here. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about your own journey, both as a professional, and I'd also, if you're okay with it, we'll talk a little bit about your personal journey as a father as well.
Okay.
Because you and I have that's what we spent the bulk of our conversation when I was on your show talking about. For me, parenthood and a marriage and suicide and some of that heavy stuff. Professionally, though, you mentioned that you were in sales for a great portion of your career. Did you, 8th grade, you knew I'm going into sales?
Well, my dad was in sales.
Oh, he was. So it did come
My
naturally.
dad was a pharmaceutical rep. And my 2nd grade teacher told my parents that I'm going to be a salesperson. And I always wanted to be like my dad. I used to, ride my bike because he would get in the car, a company car, and drive off to his territory. And I'd get on my bike and I'd, name a city that I'm going to go to. Where are you going? I'm going to Mount Clemens, which is a town outside of Detroit. And my mom would laugh and say, I'm going to Detroit, or going to Mount Clemens. Okay, see you later. And I'd ride by. So I was, in my mind, I was going to be a salesperson. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. Was your dad's a good listener? No,
he's a terrible listener. Which is probably where because I was determined that was one of the things is that I wanted to create an environment for people to be heard, because I knew I wasn't as a kid. That was a gigantic frustration for me. So I know that's the shift. And, like I said, I don't really know when it happened, but I do remember when I was working in New York that I just realized that not knowing the business and the industry at all, I was the first person hired for a quote unquote sales acumen and no industry knowledge. And I just settled into some truisms. New York City is a very competitive market. I love being in New York. I love the pace. I love the energy. I love the integrity, because a lot of things and this was a long time ago now too, 40 years ago, but a lot of things were done on handshakes. But if you were a person of your word, you had business. If you were a person who wasn't of your word, you had people throwing you out. If you made a mistake, you own it and don't repeat it. And so I just learned how the market works. And it just was, I started studying, and I guess in the process, I became a listener as I studied.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to,
right?
Especially being thrown into an industry that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
You've got to listen.
Yeah.
And talk to me about your journey as a parent and how that feeds into 100 Pedal. I'm forgetting.
Well, 100 Pedals was a nonprofit that I started, 10 years ago. I'm no longer involved with it. But I ran it. I founded it and ran it for about 8 years. And what it was a nonprofit to help moms and dads who were dealing with substance abuse issues in the family. And the reason that I founded it was I have 3 kids. My youngest child, my younger son, has been battling a heroin addiction on and off for, probably 15, 18 years, somewhere in that range. And what I learned through that whole process, and it was hard. I mean, when we first find out that our kids are struggling, we dive in as parents and we want to fix it. I mean, that's who we are. Moms and dads, we fix it. They cut themselves, you bandage it up, and you make them feel better. And it's the same thing within the substance abuse issue. They have a substance abuse issue. What do I need to do to fix it? And I found out very early on is that there's not enough love in the world to get my son sober until my son was ready. Just not enough love. But I did what every mom and dad does. is that I was all in rescue my son from the crisis of his addiction, to the extent that it caused me mental, physical, financial, emotional pain. I gained weight, my business suffered, I didn't socialize, et cetera, et cetera. And I felt as a failure as a dad every time my son relapsed or got arrested or whatever. And then the reason the name of the nonprofit was called 100 Petals is one day I had a pivotal moment in my life. And I kept, when my son was missing out on the street somewhere, I would wake up in the middle of the night to panic, and I'd go outside and I'd say a prayer. Actually, I'd say two prayers. The first prayer was, please bring my son home safely. And then the second one was, please help me get through this, because I was just so broken. And one night, the inner voice of me goes, dude, you keep saying the same prayer over again. What are you doing differently? Oh. And I started thinking about it. Said, okay, I need to take control of my life, because my son's addiction was in control of my life. So I rode my bike for an hour a day for 100 days in a row. And the meditational aspect of the bike rides provided me strength, confidence, clarity that I can do this. I can do something. And the something that I can do is I can love my son, but I can't fix my son. And that was the decision that I made at the end of that bike ride. I said to him, I go, I came to the realization that I can't be involved with your recovery. And I wanted to slap him in the face as his response, because he goes, that's okay, because now I need to manage it. I thought, you sucker.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, but
you've known all along.
yeah, you've known. Well, but they do.
Of
they
course,
do. They
of
do
course.
know. That's the thing that most parents, is like, you tell them that they need to get clean. How many kids that are using?
They already know that.
They already know that. Right?
Yeah.
If it was that easy, Dad,
yeah,
I'd already do it.
Yeah.
So what I made it do, the commit that I made to myself from that point forward, though, is meet my son where he is for who he is. Sounds like my sales thing. And so then as I was coaching parents, the more I was coaching moms and dads through this and sharing my story with them, going, I feel like I'm doing this all over again. I'm teaching mom and dads how to sell the Dave way. And then, so that's really what I started realizing is that this listening thing isn't just for business. It isn't just for me. What it is, it's the game changer for people who are wherever they are. If you're interfacing with somebody and they're struggling, they're in pain, they're lost, whether their career's in the crapper or their marriage is, a mess, or their kids are on drugs or whatever, is the best thing you can do is to meet somebody where they are in their pain, and sit with them and understand what's going on. Because once you do that, now you understand what they're going through, and now you can see what level of commitment or resource or opportunity you can provide for them to help them navigate their way through it.
What is the greatest challenge in doing that?
The greatest challenge? That's a great question. That's probably the first time anybody's ever asked me that. Well, the greatest challenge is recognizing that sitting with them is enough. They don't need an answer. In fact, if you try to give them an answer, it might not be what they need. I think one of the things that I heard in my church years ago was a couple in our church lost a 2 or 3 year old child. They put them in bed for a nap, and they never woke up, and it was devastating. And the counselor, the minister of counseling, whatever, in our church says the best thing you can do is I sat with them for afternoon after afternoon. And so I'm thinking, like, really, why? She goes, the best thing you can do is to sit with them and just let them know you care. You can't fix it. Can't bring the child back to life. You're really not going to help them short circuit their pain. What they need to know is that they're not alone. And so just sitting with them is enough. I don't need to give them advice, guidance, words of motivation or inspiration. What I need to do is I need to give them my unconditional love in the moment by just sitting with them. And so I think the biggest challenge is just that, is to recognize I don't have to have an answer. All I have to do is have a presence.
Especially as a fixer. And when you take this into the business settings and you're coaching and working with teams and individuals around listening, are they saying that this greatest challenge for them is the same thing, like really just holding space for people, or is it different?
It's different because, and that's been I would say that's my biggest challenge as a coach, yes, as a consultant, is for me, it's become so second nature that in fact, I had one, I have a really good relationship with one of the people in the office, and they said, Dave, you make this sound so easy, and it's not. And I said, you're right. It's not. And I said, it's simpler than you think it is, but it's not easy. And I think the key to the whole thing is that the idea is that we, especially in work, we come into work and we want to do our job. But the thing is that we have stories that we tell about other people. And it's those stories that prevent us from actually connecting, because if I make the assumption that, Karen, I'm going to sit down with you and talk to you about something that we had that, maybe was a tension in, maybe we had a spat in a meeting. And my advice is, hey, clear it up. Say, hey, sorry, we got sideways, blah, blah, blah. Or say, let's just say you said something to me that was very disrespectful in the meeting. Now, a lot of people say, well, you could have confronted her in the meeting. Yeah, I could have yelled at you. But then what we have is we have more tension. Everybody's going, oh my gosh, Dave and Karen are now fighting, those turkeys,
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing that I can do is step aside and, have a one-on-one with you and say, hey, Karen, when you said this to me, I need to let you know this is what I felt. This is what I experienced. And I know that's probably not what you meant. However, you need to know that that's what happened, and I would like to move past that. Mm-hmm. So if and then you might say, well, this is what I was feeling. Great. Thanks for sharing me. In the future, might be another way for us to handle it. When I give that advice to people at work, they go, oh, Karen, she'll never get it.
They're already judging or making an assumption about
what makes you think that? Oh, I've seen Karen. She does this to everybody. Well, of course she does it to her because that's her personality. Okay, that's your style. But you don't necessarily recognize, or understand the impact your style has on people. Now, it's possible that you don't care, but I'd rather have you tell me that you don't care, because then I know, back to knowing, than say, I believe you don't care and make that my truth, because that's not fair to you. And also, too, if we're in a relationship at work, because, we do have relationships where everybody's like, oh, relationship, that's such a heavy word. No, we're all in relationship with everybody all the time. Okay. There's intense, intimate relationships, and there's casual business relationships. But I got news for you. You're in a relationship with the people you work with. And if I'm in a relationship with you, I have an obligation, a responsibility to help you accomplish what you want to accomplish as a professional on the team that I'm on. So if you're doing something that's disruptive to the things that you want to accomplish and nobody tells you, that's not right. It's not fair. We have a responsibility to share that so that you can decide how you want to respond to it. Now, you may tell me I'm full of crap, and then I go, okay, love you anyway, and you need to know. And then you say, well, yeah, I get it, but that's me and I don't care. Well, that's fine. But now at least we've had this exchange, and I can say, yep, unfortunately, Karen doesn't care, but maybe I'll revisit it anyway because I still love her. Mm-hmm. And then, but a lot of times people say, oh, I really didn't know that. And then they go into defend mode. You work past the defense because, well, I didn't really mean that. I understand. But my truth is, this is my experience. So we're not going to diminish it, and we're not going to make excuses for it. We do need to understand that this is exactly what I experienced, because it's my truth. And you need to find ways to accept my truth, just like I'm willing to accept your truths.
Which I can see why it's important within a team and a company that everybody has this listening training so that we can be not only on the receiving end, but also the giving end, because it is this exchange. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about company culture and how important listening is to that, because otherwise it's the coffee cooler talk or the email that gets sent in between, and trying to manage gossip and personalities and all of that. Sometimes I think that we forget to be compassionate and respectful with each other. And we just go off of how we're feeling that day. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it.
And in conjunction with the story we're telling about them.
Yes. And being unwilling to have a new story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the other challenge, we had this conversation earlier today on a different interview, but we forget that we're all humans. If you're my boss, Karen, and I have an experience with you in an exchange, a lot of people go, yeah, but she's my boss, I can't tell her. I'm thinking, like, yeah, she's your boss, but she's also a fellow human being. And if she's doing her best to try to get you to succeed or get some things done, you have that responsibility to share with her your experiences. You're not being disrespectful. You're not being confrontational. You're saying, that you need to know, something I believe you need to know. And that making a commitment to that person that you're supporting their well-being and their growth and their success. It's not, I'm here to criticize you and tell you that I hate the way you, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm saying, when you do this, this affects me this way. And I would rather that we didn't have this experience, because I'm committed to us working together. I'm committed to us being a successful, we share common values. And I think that that's where we get hung up with this whole thing right now is that when one of the people that I interviewed, they talked about SOS. It was separating, othering, and siloing. Very powerful. But what happens is we see somebody that we disagree with or we don't like, is maybe the way their hair, maybe the color of their skin, the clothes that they wear, the way they speak, how they work. I don't really care, but we separate them. They're not me. They're not like me. They don't work like me. They don't think like me. They don't talk like me. They don't have the same values. So I separate them. They're not my people. And we leave them over here as though it's okay. And then the next thing we do is we other them, because I have my tribe, and then I have the other people. So my tribe is like, oh, in the back to the water cooler stuff. Yeah, this is the A team and that's the B team. These are the insiders. That's the cool kids. These are uncool kids. So we other them, which means it lowers our responsibility to be in relationship with them. And then if it goes to the next level, is we silo them. Because now we put them in a really nice terrible, and we just basically, now I don't have to deal with them because I put them over here in this funnel.
Right.
And so the trick is to recognize that everybody that shows up, the people that are in front of me are in front of me for a reason. And it's my responsibility to embrace the reason. They're there for a reason. I don't always know why, but they're there. And they're there for a reason. And even if I don't know the reason, that means I have an opportunity. I'm called to get to know them. Just that simple.
Thinking of a young gentleman that I was called to mentor several years ago. And I'd always wanted to be a mentor, like an official mentor role. And here I am. And it was a challenge for me in a lot of different ways. And I kept thinking, for me, this is not what I asked for. I don't know what I had in mind, but I separated myself. I othered him. I siloed. And then I realized for so long, it really was a prayer and put the people in front of me that I can be of service to. And here I am getting picky. And I completely changed the way I showed up in working with this young man, because I thought, well, I need to find out why is it that we landed here together? And he's become one of my dearest friends all these years later. And had I continued to, feel superior or somehow slighted that this is, who is sent to me to keep an eye on and help guide, it would have been an awful experience. And it was for a while, not for him so much, but for me, because I was torturing myself.
Well, part of the challenge with that is as a mentor, we want to, mentor. I get to mentor somebody. So I get to tell them how brilliant I am.
And feel so great about myself when you've achieved whatever it is I have on my agenda for you to achieve.
Right. And
baloney.
In its strictest sense, you were selfishly engaged.
For sure. Very selfishly engaged until the light bulb went off and I went,
And then you went to selfless.
Yep.
So it's about them. Why are they here? What do they need? How can I help them?
Yes.
And it's that simple.
Yeah.
Even though it sounds simple, it's not. It's not easy.
It's not easy, and yet it is simple. And with practice and that becoming part of just who we are, it becomes evident. Like you kind of described, your friends would say, "Oh, that's just Dave. That's how he shows up."
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like drawing a blank. Brene Brown in Braving the Wilderness, Adam Grant in Think Again, and then Monica Guzman is the one who talked about, the siloing one.
Yeah.
She wrote a book called I Never Thought of It That Way.
That's the name of it.
Yeah. And each one of those books, actually, if I were to have a college course, I would make those be the 3 required readings, because each book, Brene introduces the concept, Adam takes it to a different level, and then Monica applies it to her personal life, because her parents are Mexican immigrants who are Trump supporters, and she's, way on the other side of the spectrum. So every conversation was intense, disagreement. but she loves her parents and they have great values and they have a lot of commonality. So she was like, how do I navigate this tension of a clear disconnect between what we believe and that kind of stuff? But it doesn't mean that our values are off. It's just that we have this area of disagreement. But the idea being, those three things is that each one of those books has one word that is overemphasized compared to all the other ones. It's curiosity. Curiosity is the key to this, because if I draw a conclusion that I know, remember we talked about this earlier, if I draw a conclusion that I know, or I draw a conclusion that this is what I believe, or I draw a conclusion this is how it's going to be, I am not allowing myself to explore the possibilities that what my assumptions or my story or my truth or my beliefs might be corrected, adjusted, or changed. So be curious. You shed them all. That's the selfish piece. You shed all that stuff and say, okay, I'm a blank sheet of paper. Tell me what I need to know. And I share this with my clients in Detroit. I said, as a sales guy, I'm comfortable going to a sales call being the dumbest guy in the room. Most salespeople, I should know. So, okay, be the guy who knows. I don't care. I know. But that's not what the point is, because I might not be right. I know what I know. It's what I don't know that's going to get me in trouble. And I don't know what I don't know.
Is that the same as being willing to be wrong?
Yes. Because then that's the premise of Adams Grant's book is, Think Again, is that we have a set of core beliefs, values, and stuff like that. We embrace them. We internalize them. And I've got them. Okay. I'm just as strong and pig-headed as the next guy, easily. But there's a point where it's like, okay, what don't I know? Or what would interrupt what I believe to be true? Well, I don't know until I explore it. Otherwise, I can sit around and say, yep, I'm 66 years old. I've been doing business for 40 years. I've raised 3 kids. I've done the whole drug addiction thing. I'm an expert. And nobody's going to tell me anything different than what I already believe to be true. You're right. I can't unless I allow myself to say, I wonder if there's something different out there. That's curiosity. So willingness to be curious is very powerful, but most people, being curious is like releasing control. It's letting go of the fear, doubt, and worry that I might be wrong. The fear, doubt, and worry that I might have to change my thinking. The fear, doubt, and worry that, I've been wrong all along. That kind of thing. I don't know if you've ever listened to it's not Adam Stanley, Andy Stanley, a minister of Northwood Church. He's got a podcast called Think Again. It's a brilliant podcast. And basically it's his sermons from his time in the church. But he said to the audience, and there's 1,000 people in this church. I've been to his church a couple of times. It's just amazing. But he says, there's 100% chance that you guys, every one of you in this room is wrong about something. And he says, you know how I know? And this is beautiful. He said, everyone here can tell a story about something that they believed to be true when they were younger, and they've changed their mind about it. So chances are 100% you're wrong about something right now. You just don't know what it is. Isn't that interesting?
Powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And 3 scenarios flashed through my mind just now when you said that from my childhood, where I'm like, oh gosh, yes. Yeah.
I always said I was never going to be in business. And here's all the reasons why not. And here I am as,
owning your own business. Yeah. Go figure.
Yeah.
Do you have a book? I feel like I already should know that answer.
I do have a book. I have a couple books. I should say one now, because the other one I took out of print because I didn't like the narrative. But I wrote a book about my journey with my son's addiction. It's called The Addicted Child. And I think it's still for sale somewhere. I don't promote it. It was, I kind of like you and your radio shows. I probably have like 600 blogs out there that I wrote with 100 pedals. And what I did was I curated them all and updated them and wrote a book that, basically captures the key components of like selfless listening and sitting with your kid and those kind of things. Gosh, it's been out there like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
I wrote several books. I wrote a book called Cooked Up Sales. I wrote a book called Behind the Dumpster, which is where my son's addiction journey started. We found him living behind a dumpster in a strip mall about half a mile from where he grew up as a kid. And then I wrote the book The Addicted Child, which was replacing the Behind the Dumpster, because the narrative of Behind the Dumpster was very confrontational. I was telling my son's story and the impact of all his behaviors on me. Most people didn't see it that way, but I felt like I was demonizing my son. and I didn't want to tell that story.
It's interesting you say that because one of the things that we talked about on your show was my experience with my ex-husband and his addiction and eventual attempt to suicide. And it's only been 3 years since we've been in relationship. And since that all kind of happened, came to a head. And I know you know this because I think this is how we found each other, was that you started listening or paying attention to my blogging, which was on Facebook at the time. And people have said, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. I don't want to be that story. And that story was as much Mike's as it was mine, even though it was through my lens. And I did everything I can, I'm sure you did too, to be protective and caring and respectful and compassionate of Mike. And I was still in the thick of chaos and trauma. And so it's interesting that you say that. The narrative for me has changed, and I continue to stay open to and curious what's next for me, even though sometimes I get so frustrated that nothing's coming in super clear yet.
Well, that's because, you're a performance-based person. We're dialed into results. We're dialed, when I first talked to you on the phone way back in like October, November, I got driver out of you. I got it. Driver. And it's so hard as a driver because we want to see the path. Am I making progress? And our definition of progress is, they say you're going to lose 2.5 pounds a week. That's bullshit. I'm going to lose 4 pounds a week because I'm Dave Cook.
Right.
And then it doesn't happen. So that just doesn't make sense. I should be moving faster. I should be having more clarity. I should be having more results. And that's the challenge that we have, as opposed to really just trusting the journey. And big conversation that we have with parents all the time is, they talk about behaviors and outcomes. What do I do when? How do I respond to and stuff like that? And it doesn't always go the way they want it to go. And I said, this is a progression. Okay, this is progress. Did you try it? Yes. Okay, how did it go? Not as good as I wanted. What could you have done differently or better?
Instead of abandoning it altogether.
Yeah, or saying it didn't work. Okay, that's a declaration. And from it didn't work. Great. Do we want to move from there, or we just want to sit and say, okay, it's not going to work? Well, no, we got to figure it out. Good. Then let's look at it. That conversation is progress, because now I'm going to do something different again next time. The problem is that like with moms and dads with addiction, their measure of success was, did my son run to the treatment center?
Right.
That's not progress. That's your goal.
Staying attached to an outcome.
Yeah. Okay. If I'm doing it for that, what I'm doing is I'm basically surrendering my life to my child until they do what I want them to do.
Right. Which you personally were there.
Yeah. That doesn't work.
No.
And you can sit here and spend the rest of your life in hold until my son finds recovery, or I can find ways to love my son in his mess and live my life, hoping he does, because of the fact that he's experiencing my love and my commitment and my support without the backside of it, which is my judgment, my criticism, my disappointment, and all that other crap, because that stuff is negative energy, and my son will experience that. So he needs to experience me in my love for him, because that's my commitment.
And you have, I remember a story when we were on your show. You talked about the shift for you was when he came home and he was blitzed out of his mind, and you would welcome him in. Can you share that? Because I remember that being really significant for me.
Yeah, it was Saturday mornings. Sometimes we wouldn't see him for a week or two. Usually it was just a week, but Saturday mornings, 9 o'clock in the morning. And if you know, the time zone change in Arizona, 9 o'clock is noon. So that's kickoff time for footballs on the East Coast. And every Saturday morning, my son would show up with his Michigan shirt on. Yeah, I know I raised my son to be Michigan fans, but he'd show up with his Michigan shirt on, and, I'd be so happy to see him, but he was, he stunk. And sometimes he was a little foggy and hazy, so he was obviously high. And I would welcome him in, and we'd sit and we'd watch the football game, and et cetera, et cetera. And then after the game was over, he'd leave. I said, "You want something to eat?" "No, I'm good." "You want a shower?" "No, I'm good." And he would leave.
Let him be.
And it was really weird. But then after a little while, I'm starting to think, like my wife even said to me, she goes, "What's he coming over for? You kidding? He came over to watch football with his parents." Because that's what we did. So in the midst of his mess, in the midst of his chaos, he would always say, no, back to the thing. He knew he needed to find recovery, but he didn't know how, or didn't have the belief or the structure for him to do it. But in the middle of it, he created a path that says, at least I can connect with my parents. At least I can have something. And my son tells the story of this to this day. He says, I really never had it that bad living on the street, which I don't know how anybody can say that, but he said it. My truth is if I spent one night on the street, it would be my last night, I would figure it out. But he said it got to the point where I missed my parents. Mm. And he said, I want more of that. And that's what migrated him towards his recovery. So it's back to the power of love. I could have closed the door on him because a lot of people would say that, you need to practice tough love. We can have a whole show on that. We're not going to do that here, but Dave does not believe in tough love. And if you want to talk about it, call me up later. But I don't close the door on him because he's there. He's present to me. He needs his dad for something. I don't know what it is. And I'm going to sit with him. And that goes back to the meeting them where they're for who they're. Give them what you can give them, not give them what you can give them on conditions, because love is love. You just give it to them. Sometimes you give until it hurts, but you still give it to them.
Yep. So good to be with you in my home this time. How can folks stay in touch with you? And what is the easiest way if someone's listening and they're like, gosh, I really want to have our team spend some time with Dave? Is it just a phone call or a conversation to get that started?
I would say the easiest way is just to call me on the phone. I can give you my email as well, but it's, my do you want me to give you my phone number?
You can. Yeah.
It's 586, which is a great Michigan exchange, people. 586-201-9057. And then if you wanted to email me, it's Dave at the Cook Group LLC. Keep in mind, Cook has got an E on the end of it. So it's the Cook, COOKE Group LLC.com.
I like the high note on the E.
Yeah.
helps us remember. I love it. And then the website, thecookgroupllc.com.
Correct.
And I know you're on LinkedIn. You're on Twitter too.
Yeah.
Are you active?
No.
I never could wrap my brain or my fingers on Twitter. Never could do that. And did I know that you're on Instagram too? Are you active on Instagram?
Yeah. If you wanted to find me on other social media sites like Instagram or Facebook or whatever, I'm actually the David Cook.
Yes.
With an E on the end.
Yep. You didn't do that this time. With an E?
With an E.
There we go. Very proper. So great to hear more about your business and you as an individual. I really enjoy spending time with you, and I'm grateful that you would be willing to come and share your story on Business Radio X today.
Thanks, Karen. This was a blast.
I'm glad. And we were longer than a half hour because we can do that here. Very good. You've been listening to Phoenix Business Radio, broadcasting live from the Max 6 Entrepreneurial Work Center. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thanks for listening.